Good morning, everyone. Hello. How are you? Come on in. Come on in. My name's Jeff Kane. I'm from Cal Poly Humboldt. I'm one of the co-chairs of the meeting. This is Lenya, Quinn-Davidson, and Morgan Varner, who's also part of the team. First, I wanted to, can we go backwards? There we go. I just wanted to thank the Esalen tribe for hosting us here and welcoming us so well on Tuesday, and then for Little Bear and Chanel for helping us engage with the other tribes in the region. That was wonderful. I also wanted to thank you all for coming. We can't really do this without you, all the presenters, the special session coordinators, moderators. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This was the largest that we've had, 900 people. So we appreciate your flexibility and squeezing into some of the small rooms. It was really just fun to see everybody engaging with the presentations. I just thought it was wonderful to recognize how many people, not only just how many people, but where they came from. So we're representing over 25 countries and tribal nations. And so we're trying to really become this international association for fire ecology. So thank you. And then it's also not possible without the board of directors for the Association for Fire Ecologists, and then also the Student Association for Fire Ecology. We're trying to recruit the next generation of folks to be on the board. We encourage you to nominate yourself and be engaged at all levels within our society. I also wanted to thank the program committee. It really was a wonderful group. Everybody contributed great ideas to help make this happen. And then last and especially not least, we really want to thank Annie Oxart. Thank you, Annie. You've probably seen her running around and doing everything. And so we have
a gift for you, Annie. You have to come up here. I made Annie a custom screen-printed sweatshirt with the art from the shirt this year. That was my art.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
And there's other good stuff in there too.
Thank you.
Okay, next we also want to acknowledge our sponsors, and so there's a slide for that. So we had a couple really big sponsors. One of them was CAL FIRE. We also had the University of California Agriculture and Natural Resources, which is where I work, and maybe the advisors, our UC&R folks, could just raise their hands. Hopefully they're here. There we go, Barb. And then we also had, who's our other big sponsor? Oh, the BIA. Yeah, and then that whole list of other folks. We had a lot of people contributing here. So just a round of applause for all those sponsors. We did offer the sponsors the opportunity to share a video, and we only had one taker on that, but Esri, we have a video from Esri that's just really brief. So let's go ahead and play that. On the next slide.
Does your emergency operations center rely on paper maps to coordinate disaster response? Oftentimes, information on paper maps is already outdated by the time your team meets to brief. Now more than ever, your team needs up-to-date information that allows you to make data-driven decisions and provide accurate reports to the public. Esri's digital solution for emergency management can help solve those issues and more. As a disaster approaches, ArcGIS allows you to understand the impact and scope of potential damage and anticipate how many resources will be needed. This real-time information can help you monitor rapidly changing conditions, anticipate when and where to take action, and share up-to-date information with other departments and the public. A comprehensive web-based dashboard provides actionable information that facilitates a more impactful incident briefing. And with authoritative data, your command staff and elected officials can make informed decisions that protect the community. These real-time maps can be shared across multiple devices, allowing your whole team to access authoritative data from wherever they may be. And the most important component of disaster response is to provide accurate information to the public. Esri's solution includes web-based maps that are designed to scale when the demand for information goes viral. This tool allows citizens to effectively assess personal risks, avoid hazards, and evacuate if and when the time comes. After a large-scale disaster, your focus will shift to damage assessment. Our digital data collection tool allows your team to capture important information from a mobile device. They can complete forms, take photos, and designate a precise location to the damage. When connected, the application will provide real-time information to the office. And when there's no connectivity, you can still collect information and synchronize later. Because this process is more efficient, you can quickly ascertain overall damage costs and mobilize recovery resources. With all of this information, we'd like to ask you, if a disaster were to impact your community, would you be ready to respond?
All right, you all have to buy Esri products now.
Okay. What a way to start the day. Okay, we're going to bring Eric and Annie up. They want to do something for longtime members.
Hello, everyone. I'm on the AFE board. My name is Eric Knapp. I represent the Membership and Engagement Committee. And really, members are the lifeblood of this organization. We could not have conferences. We wouldn't have a journal. We wouldn't have many things without our members. And I know that many of you become members through registration for the conference. We oftentimes see a big peak in membership and then it drops off in non-conference years. We're hoping that you all, if you have the means, choose to remain members. And we have a lot of long-term members that have supported us year after year. So we thought we would do, I'm gonna have a little prize drawing. A couple of our long-term members, although they're in this bag here, and Annie is gonna draw a couple names. And they're gonna get a little, can you read it? I don't have my glasses.
This is Sonia Leverkus. Here?
We'll keep your name.
How many are we doing?
One more,
Oh,
yeah.
one more. Okay. This is Danny Fry.
Yeah. Well, I had cross-referenced conference attendees with our long-term member list. I was hoping to be in the room, but we'll send you a t-shirt, and not just any t-shirt. As Lenya mentioned, the conference t-shirt for this year was her design. It's got a ton of great symbolism on it. We completely underestimated the demand. It's sold out. They'll be on the AFE store coming up. So, artist, fabulous scientist, Lenya, thank you.
Thank you, guys. That was very sweet. One thing we did forget to mention is the AFE board, the program committee, and the safe leadership get a prize, a gift. So you can go up and choose something off of that table if you're in those categories.
All right, I'm going to introduce our first plenary speaker, Christine Eriksen from the University of Bern in Switzerland. So please welcome, if we can cue her slides up. Please welcome Christine. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to start by paying my respect to the traditional custodians of the lands on which we meet today. Pay my respect to their elders, past, present, and future. Thank you also to the AFE board for inviting me to be part of the conversation. I am so excited to be part of this particular session because I think this session reflects what our future looks like in wildfire management. And I'm also excited about the program. The program has been so exciting this conference. But I'm going to do a little bit of a reality check because what we are experiencing here these days, maybe not quite what it looks like out on the ground and in the offices. So I'm going to start my talk by kind of reflecting on our capacity to cope and care and coexist. And coexist is really the key point here. And I'm going to do it from kind of a social and structural analysis. And I'll frame my talk by two concepts that will be familiar to many of you, anchor points and fire lines. So wildland firefighters set up anchor points to gain an advantageous position or location from which to start constructing a fire line with the hope to create a burn boundary. And so in this way, both notions hold deep symbolic meaning as they play a crucial role in controlling the spread of wildfire while upholding the safety of firefighters. But notions of anchor points and fire lines also act as poignant metaphors in acknowledging our growing inability to manage fire in our current geologic epoch, also known as the Anthropocene. While climate change is often depicted in public debates as being the main culprit of our fiery climate crisis, we know for a fact that social factors are equally at play. So our climate crisis is a result of the relationship between land use, fire exclusion, tree dieback in a hotter and drier climate, which acts as this positive feedback loop that is feeding catastrophic wildfires. Human activity has altered the parameters of Earth systems, making fire lines less effective in controlling the known and emerging consequences of climate change. And today, environmental management can feel akin to fighting fires of such escalating intensity that neither an anchor point can be found nor a fire line established. Our transformation of Earth systems necessitates a transformation of the relationship between humans and fire. And I want to draw on the quote here from a currently very popular book, Fire Weather by John Valiant. And he's really talking about carbon dioxide, even though that's not what I want to focus on. But he's saying, what the atmosphere and oceans are telling us is that carbon dioxide doesn't get the respect it deserves. Others have been saying this too for a long time, until very recently. And this is kind of a throwaway line, but I think it's really important. So he says, until very recently, most of them have been turned out, brushed off, or appeased in ways that bear strong resemblance to the experience of people reporting incidents of sexism and racism. Where? I can't see it. So while I aspire to this Congress and the aspirations of the meeting here to celebrate our fire family across generations, cultures, and disciplines, I strongly believe that you cannot truly ignite connections to transform our relationship with fire. Sorry, my computer just did some funny things here. So to transform our relationship with fire without continually acknowledging how each and every one of us are individually privileged or marginalized depending on our social characteristics, be that our age, disability, gender, sexuality, race, ethnicity, education, and so on. Our so-called fire family has a history of not valuing all generational knowledge equally. It does not treat all cultures with the same respect. It struggles to embrace diversity and inclusion, and different disciplines are not afforded the same status when it comes to the projects we fund, the insights we publish and reproduce, or the voices that we choose to amplify. And so to grow stronger together, to strengthen our collective capacity to coexist with wildfire, we must fully address the injustices of the past that continue to haunt us today. And a recovery can be in resistance, a resistance to forget, a commitment to learn from our mistakes. Change for good requires momentum, which is usually driven by sustained and painstakingly hard work. Change takes time because it takes time to build social momentum. But in the 20-odd years since I started my career as a fire social scientist, the impetus for change has been particularly noticeable since the Black Saturday fires in Australia in 2009. The frequency, intensity, scale, and impact of the Black Saturday fires and a disproportionate number of other wildfires around the world since then, not least here in California, has stripped away the surface of social structures and revealed this really grim picture of long-standing social and structural inequality. It is now an unquestionable fact that socially diverse people can experience exposure, vulnerability, and adaptive capacity quite differently based on historical and structural inequities. And this fact has added urgency to a vital question. How can we coexist with fire in a hotter and drier climate? I believe we probably already know the answers to this question, yet we struggle to implement the changes that are needed, partly due to the lifestyle changes this would require for many of us, but in large part also because of ingrained historical and structural inequities. There are different answers, of course, for different parts of society, such as residents living in at-risk areas, urban development at the WUI, air quality control, and so on. But the answer I want to focus on for the remainder of my talk concerns the sustainability of the social and organizational structures that impact the workplace culture and how we attempt to manage wildfires. And so 3 particular social and structural issues underpin many of our current struggles. 1, a long and troublesome history of marginalizing Indigenous people and their fire stewardship practices. 2, a toxic patriarchal workplace culture that discriminates against women, BIPOC, and LGBTIQ people. And 3, an exodus of wildland firefighters from the workforce due to longer and harder fire seasons that make the workload, poor pay, and lack of social benefits unsustainable. So while wildfire itself has made the need for change so blatantly obvious, it is often the people whose lives and voices have been systematically marginalized or discriminated against over time that is now driving the change and the momentum for change. For Indigenous people, this particular point in time, the fiery crisis that we now face is by no means the first time that they have had to cope with devastating change. Ecocultural fire is such an apt expression for Indigenous burning practices because it highlights how Indigenous fire stewardship has been tried and tested both ecologically by climatic and ecological change for millennia, and tried and tested culturally for centuries as Indigenous people have been persecuted, policed, or denied access to the land, resources, ancestral ties, and sovereignty that underpin their ecocultural knowledge and practices. Given these long histories, It is quite extraordinary that when I first visited California as a researcher in 2011 and started collaborating with Don Hankins at CSU Chico, and I owe Don a huge thank you, not just for his friendship, but for everything he has taught me. When we started collaborating, the dominant narrative among fire management and fire researchers was still a dismissal of Indigenous fire stewardship as either being a thing of the past, as that was incompatible with land management practices that govern a demographically altered world. And this quote here from an Aboriginal fire ranger in Australia really sums it up. So this ranger is talking about how he had presented the traditional knowledge revival pathways program to a bunch of white fire managers, and they were quite offended in what he was saying, and they kept saying, well, show us, what is this magical trick? And so he's saying this revival, the revival is really important. So in the dozen or so years since 2011, catastrophic wildfires has demonstrated the dire consequences of excluding ecocultural fire from the landscape. But at the same time, landscapes managed with what is increasingly known as good fire has shown their ability to mitigate the spread of wildfire while sustaining a healthy ecosystem. And so I would argue one of the silver linings of catastrophic wildfires is the gradual opening it has provided to Indigenous fire stewards to tell their stories, to participate in fire management policy and legal debates, and to rejuvenate their ecocultural burning practices slowly but surely. Another silver lining of catastrophic wildfires is that the need for a bigger and stronger workforce has facilitated a growing recognition of not just the need for a more diverse workforce, but also the advantages of more inclusive leadership and workplace culture. So women, let alone BIPOC and LGBTIQ people, were still an underrepresented and by many also an unwanted part of the workforce when Shelley Pesholok and I published our respective books on gendered dimensions of wildfire back in 2013. Our research made visible what until then had predominantly been a hushed internal matter about unsustainable working cultures, or at times a legal struggle for equal rights in the workplace, as portrayed in the seminal work by Elaine Enerson. It was also the beginning of a more systematic examination by researchers, journalists, and organizations alike of a toxic workplace culture that harbor a distressing amount of sexual harassment and gender discrimination. In the years after our books were published, many attention-grabbing headlines made the news, and AFE appointed a committee that I was a part of to gather evidence with which to take a stand against harassment and discrimination. And the momentum is growing, even though it's taking a long time to trickle down onto the ground. So today, concerted effort is being made by many to attract and retain women in the profession through training, networking, and policies that strive towards equal opportunities, informed leadership, and a workplace culture where toxic masculinity is challenged rather than celebrated. At the time I was writing my book, women wildland firefighters made up about 5% of wildland firefighters in North America. Today, that number has grown to between 9 and 12%. So even though there's been improvements, we clearly still have a long way to go. Structural and cultural workplace changes are, of course, challenging at the best of times, but they are especially challenging right now due to the heavy toll that longer fire seasons and more frequent devastating wildfires is taking on the whole workforce, but particularly on wildland firefighters. So along with the known risks and potentially life-threatening aspects of their job, wildland firefighters are known to be experiencing increasing rates of depression, PTSD, alcohol and drug abuse, and death by suicide. Better pay might help retain experienced firefighters and attract new recruits, but without accompanying programs, benefits and support, such as paid rest periods, physical and mental health support, and an inclusive workplace culture, wildland firefighting is clearly not a sustainable profession in our fiery world. Now, if we know that a healthy, safe and sustainable working environment rests on the need to recruit and retain people who are valued regardless of their social characteristics. If we know that a healthy, safe and sustainable workplace rests on equitable working conditions that provide a decent salary, social benefits and healthcare. If we know that a healthy and sustainable environment rests on local and indigenous knowledge that has been passed on for generations. If we know that a healthy, safe and sustainable wildfire management depends on policies and governance that are driven and supported by in-depth insights from the social sciences, why then are we not making the wholesale changes needed to enable all of these factors? Instead, we tend to put them in kind of the too hard basket, or we willfully ignore them, or many actively fight to stop such changes. Why? Well, a short and simple answer, I would say, is privilege. Privilege is a concept that refers to a special right, advantage, or immunity granted or made available only to particular people or groups, usually because of their gender, sexuality, race, ethnicity, class, and education. And in his examination of how to undo privilege, Bob Pease highlights the often uncharted and latent terrain of how privilege is socially and structurally reproduced in everyday life. So Pease believes that too much attention has been focused on how the responsibility of those who are oppressed, and too little attention has been paid to has been given to those in privileged group and how they reproduce inequality. And so, as he states, part of the problem is that it is very difficult to get the issue of privilege on the agenda because it is so well legitimated. Privilege is not recognized as such by many of those who have it. Privilege appears to be natural, and therefore it is necessary to unmask privilege and make it more visible so its consequences can be addressed. At the same time as many of those who have privilege do not recognize it as such, those who do not have it see and feel the consequences of disenfranchisement all the time. So in her examination of complaint activism, Sarah Ahmed unpacks how the more we challenge structures, the more we come up against them. And Ahmed explains how in-house, to keep information inside is how the house can appear in order from the outside. Even when complaints are not about sexism and racism comes up in what comes down. Race and gender, they are always in there, in the situations we find ourselves in for those of us who are not white and not men. Ahmed continues, you come to learn how violence against those who challenge violence is how structures are maintained. You come to realize that some are more readily targeted. You come to witness the violence of the status quo when you challenge the violence of the status quo. And it is because of these systematic inequities, and the inability of some to recognize them, that the power of generational knowledge, cultural diversity, and interdisciplinarity, which is the theme of this Congress, is a double-edged sword in the context of wildland fire, because while generational knowledge and cultural diversity and interdisciplinarity provide the answers needed for vital change, history also shows how certain generations, certain cultures, and certain disciplines inherit taken for granted privileges that give them a vested interest in either maintaining the status quo or changing some things but not others. So acknowledging this double-edged sword helps us to see how generational knowledge can both refer to tried and tested local and Indigenous ways of knowing that can be passed on to future generations so they can relearn how to coexist with wildfire, or it can refer to the legacy of historical and organizational structures, political agendas, and everyday cultural norms which act as barriers to change. Cultural diversity can both refer to a strengthening of our capacity to cope in a fiery world by evening the playing field for all people regardless of their social characteristics, or it can be a buzzword used by institutions and in policies to appear inclusive while reproducing the status quo. Similarly, interdisciplinarity can both refer to true collaboration across disciplines and methodological approaches, which can facilitate new ways of seeing and doing, or it can be a disguise used by scientists in dominant disciplines to include collaborators like social scientists and Indigenous people on grant proposal to enhance the chances of obtaining competitive research funding, but then systematically sideline or belittle those diverse marginalized voices once the funds have been secured, thus reinventing the same old broken wheel. And so in this way, diversity can be how you are colonized again, how what you have, what you are, is taken from you again. And it is difficult to change such problematic privilege because until recently, many dominant groups have rarely been challenged to think about how their own dominance, let alone made to understand how their dominance is based on unearned advantages and why the loss of these advantages will benefit all of society. And it is also difficult because white, cisgender, heterosexual men trained in science and engineering have dominated universities, wildland fire, and emergency management for so long that social norms are written into disaster management policies precisely because they are written by and for dominant groups. So this approach is so blatantly inadequate today because more people from more walks of life live at risk from wildfire than ever before. But it is also wholly unsustainable because the white gendered structures that are so deeply ingrained in the operational procedures and cultural norms of wildland fire are inhibiting the inclusion and retention of more women, BIPOC, and LGBTIQ people into a dwindling workforce. And it is wholly incapable of supporting white cisgender men who struggle to fulfill unhealthy cultural demands for heroic forms of masculinity in the face of climate-exacerbated wildfires. Some of you in the room today will know only too well how much more weight you have to carry because of the lack of support you have received in raising the injustices you are experiencing. Be that as a woman, a BIPOC, LGBTIQ, or as a wildland firefighter. If there is one thing climate-exacerbated wildfires is teaching us, it is that we must learn from what we have failed to achieve. One of the ways that we can do this is by listening to activist scholars like Bob Peace and Sarah Ahmed, whose work painstakingly shows us that when weight is distributed more, each person carries less. And how, when a burden is shared, you can also widen the range of activities undertaken. By diversifying the workforce and empowering leaders to support such diversity, we can transform problematic privilege and inhibiting social norms. But to truly intervene in what is wrong requires noticing it is wrong, and that we must all do. Noticing something can be what we do for others to stop the same thing from happening. And that same thing can be thought of as the institutional legacy that tolerates privilege and disregards public needs in favor of personal or political gains. In addition to noticing, you can also actively create change in your everyday life. And one approach to help you do this is this Venn diagram created by climate leader Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson, who emphasizes that you are most likely most powerful in your existing roles because you already have specialized knowledge and robust networks there. So how might you lean into your talents? And Johnson argues that if you identify what you are good at, what works needs doing, and what brings you joy, then where your answers come together or overlap in this Venn diagram is where you should put your action effort. And no matter how big or small your steps towards an inclusive and sustainable working environment are, they matter because what we need is change in every sector of wildland fire and in every at-risk community. And in addition to leveraging your talents, also support others in using their talents, as that will start to demolish the societal barriers like racism and sexism that prevent people from fully devoting themselves to solutions for coexisting with wildfires. So to conclude, it's a light breakfast talk this morning. To conclude, if each and every one of us intervene in what is wrong by noticing it is wrong, and each and every one of us create change by identifying what we can do in our everyday life, we will start to find anchor points that will enable us to cope with the heavy toll frequent devastating wildfires is taking on our physical and mental well-being, be it as firefighters, cultural knowledge holders, land stewards, wildfire survivors, at-risk residents, or as researchers. It will help us to change the status quo by undoing problematic privilege so generational knowledge, cultural diversity, and interdisciplinarity can help us survive and thrive in a fiery world. And to help us do that, we are fortunate to have Royal, Ryan, and Kyle with us here today to share innovative solutions that they are spearheading to enable change. And as you listen to them, please remember the social and structural inequities that their initiatives are up against, and therefore take inspiration not just from their innovation, but also from their courage to challenge and change the status quo. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Christine. That's really, it's a great reminder that we're all trying to change this paradigm and just being reminded that it's really about what you do, not what you say and the words you use. So, thank you.
Yeah, beautiful presentation, Christine, and such a great foundation for our next two speakers, or next two sets of speakers, who I am so excited to introduce. So when we started talking about this plenary session, the co-chairs, that was kind of our big task, was to design these plenaries. And the first person I thought of who I wanted to be here today is Royal Ramey. We met last year or earlier this year actually, we were both speaking at a timber industry conference, and we looked at each other across the room. It was like, that's the guy I want to hang out with. So we really clicked, and he is the Chief Program Officer and co-founder of the Forestry and Fire Recruitment Program. And I think you're going to find his energy and spirit very infectious. So Royal, come on up, and we can't wait to hear from you. I guess you just pressed that.
Ooh, there's a lot of people in here. Let me get a little comfortable. So how everybody's doing today? Energy, can I get some energy? Okay. So, good morning, my name is Royal Ramey. I'm the co-founder and the Chief Program Officer of the Forestry and Fire Recruitment Program, also known as FFRP. And I'm excited to be here with you today. Take a look at this.
Fire came through this whole community and burned it all up. Everything is just gone.
November 2018, the campfire. The most devastating, most deadliest fire in California history. Just 6 weeks earlier, my fire engineer and I got a call for coverage in Butte County. As we were driving, I was noticing that there was a lot of brush, a lot of brush, that hasn't been cut back in a long time. And I was thinking about the fact that on this 2-lane road, there was only one way in and one way out. CAL FIRE stats started running through my brain. They pride themselves on containment rate of 90%, keeping fires 10 acres or less. I said to my engineer, if a wildland fire started here, wouldn't it be nearly impossible to defend? Wouldn't it be really hard to contain it in any way? Just 6 weeks later, 5,596 firefighters were battled in a campfire. That's almost the entire CAL FIRE fleet. A faulty PG&E line led to 85 civilian fatalities, 153,000 acres burned, and 18,000 structures destroyed. But what if I told you it was preventable? What if I told you that in 2018, there were 9,000 incarcerated men and women being trained to fight fire in California with no valuable pathway to get a job when they were released? That's enough people to more than double the number of firefighters we have in the state. Show of hands. How many of you knew that California pays incarcerated people $2 an hour to fight wildland fires without any real hope of getting hired as firefighters upon release? Can I get some hands? Ooh, okay. So we know the problem here, right? Okay, that's great. So here's the deal. Now I'm gonna lay my hair down a little bit. So here's the deal. Climate change is real. Wildfires are more common, right? And there's a personnel shortage that dates back to the 1940s. And the recidivism rate for those being released from prison in California is 44%. We have a disaster raging in our forest and on our communities. Today, I want to talk to you about the untapped intersection between criminal justice and the climate crisis. And this is where it gets real, for me personally. My passion comes from being formerly incarcerated myself. As a little kid, I was a little firecracker, a little go-getter. Oh, look at that little guy up there. The reason I can talk to anybody is because I was always trying to talk to everybody. My mom and my sisters, we lived in Section 8 housing in the San Fernando Valley. But look, in black culture, I wanted those Air Jordans. I wanted those gold chains and the gold, watches and all that. I did, I truly did. But so at 11 years old, I was selling candy. I was scalping tickets at sporting events. But when I was 14, I actually worked at a mortuary. Anything I could do to make a little money. And I always did well in school. Always did well in school. But in middle school, I was a black kid living in a Hispanic neighborhood. And every time I went to the park, I got jumped by a gang that was on the next block. It helped me build resilience, and it taught me to not be scared of certain situations. But it made me bitter. I started engaging in the streets and had a couple of minor incidents until I had a major one. I actually got shot in the face. That's when my rage took off. After that, there was a fire in me I couldn't really control. I was pretty angry with my mom. I was totally infatuated with the idea of my father. I couldn't be mad at him because I didn't know him. When I was 17 years old, I got locked up for a robbery for 13 months. I got my GED while I was in county jail. I started going to Mount Sac Community College. I had financial aid. I was working, but that wasn't enough for me. Now I was I knew now that I was just supposed to suck it up and grind it out. That's what so many people do. But back then, I still had an ego. I had a negative mentality. I was trying to do the right thing, but it was easier to do the wrong thing. I robbed a drug dealer thinking that it would be easy money. On July 1st, 2010, I got shackled up 4 o'clock in the morning and got taken to Tehachapi State Prison. I went away for 4 years, 8 months. It was brutal being in that cell. I remember I had, this sports magazine of John Wall on the cover. He was the #1 draft pick at that time. Reading the article, staring at his picture, a black man about my age, I kept asking myself, how did I get here and how did he get there? Instead of obsessing over what my mom couldn't provide, I started thinking about the fact that my great-grandma went to prison, my grandma went to prison. A lot of what I wanted from her, she never had. She did the best that she could. I forgave her, and I started to educate myself. Whew, that was tough right there, that was tough. I read The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, The 4 Agreements. I studied the Bible. But let me make it clear. I wasn't squeaky clean. It was a process. California prisons are vicious. I engaged in the prison politics. I spent some time actually in the hole. But there were some cool brothers in there that had some swag, but they had their minds together. And I realized I had the power of choice. Whether you're a trash man, electrician, a lawyer, a nurse, it's all about being connected with other people, doing for others, inspiring others. You can have all the skills and the resources and the tools in the world, but until you embrace fearlessness, you give up letting things get in your way, nothing will ever change. Honestly, I had to kill myself when I was in prison. I had to get rid of the old Royal. I had to, because he was a monster. He was a little monster. I wrote down some things I didn't like about myself and things I wanted to be. I want to be honest. I want to be trustworthy. And I want to be a good person. One of my favorite favorite chapters in the 7 Habits is begin with the end in mind. And I started to imagine the family I wanted, the house, the car, worrying about no bills, right? That was the end for me. Having a modest life with a good paying job and a woman that was willing to love me regardless of my background. Due to prison overcrowding in California, I was transferred to Arizona, then into Mississippi. But in 2012, I got called to fire camp at Sierra Conservation Center back home. I had 24 hours to decide if I wanted to go. Now, when people talk about fire camp in prison, they talk more about freedom than actually fire. You're not in your cell, you can lift weights, you get good food, right? And you out in the community. And besides, I called my mom, she said, boy, you better stop playing and get your butt down here. I haven't seen you in years. So that's what I did. I gotta be pretty honest with you. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. If I had, I probably wouldn't have done it. You start by doing basic fire training, which involves a lot of hiking. I was in shape, doing push-ups and, all that little stuff, but this is totally different kind of being in shape. My captain said to me one day, he said, Ramey, you're the youngest guy on the crew and the slowest. I was struggling, y'all. I ain't gonna lie to you, I was struggling. And the old Royal would have wanted to fight him back in the day. I'm talking about I'm slow and I'm young and all that. Let's fight, But I had to learn self-control. And I also tell my recruits all the time, it's time to embrace the suck, right? I had started exercising my emotional intelligence. So I had to go back to the 4 agreements. Don't make assumptions. Always do your best. Be impeccable with your word. And don't take things personal. Here was that power choice right in front of me. The fire still was inside of me, but I was learning more to control it. I was on my first real fire. It was like 4 hours straight. I was doing it. I was proving myself to myself. And I thought to myself, this is some gangster stuff right here. This is dope. I could be a badass without committing a crime. That's what I was thinking. I could see myself in it. I could see myself in it, and I can see myself beyond camp, life without camp, having that job, right? And I'm sure a lot of y'all all know about this, but it blew me. Oh, I'm sorry. Ooh, skip the line. I got totally immersed with fire behavior, cutting down trees, strategic and tactics on the fire line. I will never forget the first time my captain led me into a back burn. So I gave you a spoiler alert. To prevent a structure from burning, you burn around it. And it actually blew my mind when I first saw it. I did 20 months in camp. So imagine this. I made $4,500 for more than a year and a half worth of work. But you can put a price on what I got. I learned that when a fire is raging, you can use everything at your disposal to save what you can. But at the right level of physical fitness, training, emotional intelligence, skills, you significantly can reduce the number of ignition points that leads to devastation. Controlling the fire, prescribing the burn, that can lead to renewal and growth. Then you roll back into camp, and there's a huge sign that says, "Thank you, firefighters." And after all I have taken from people, all that anger I felt for so long, the pride that hit me when I saw that sign, I never had a feeling like that before. Then I paroled, and things got ugly real quick. I wanted to be a firefighter, but there was no easy way of doing it, right? The prestige title of firefighter, nobody wanted to that being tarnished by someone who have committed crimes in their community. The message was clear. Prison and public service don't mix. It's like oil and water. You're good enough to fight fire when you're in prison, but you don't deserve that chance when you get out. Meanwhile, I applied to places like Amazon. They was like, no, we don't know what you know. Absolutely no. It was rough, but I refused to give up. I went to a wildland academy at Victor Valley College. I got picked up on the Type 2 crew in San Bernardino National Forest. Anybody from BDF? The following year, I got hired as a seasonal forestry technician with the Forest Service, and then I got my prestigious AS degree from Crafton Hills College, and I got my EMT. And then in 2018, I got hired by Cal Fire. Finally, I was wearing that coveted blue uniform. I married a beautiful woman that's here today with two amazing kids. There we go. I'm so proud to call them my son and daughter. And I was living a life I started to imagine sitting in that cell. Oh yeah, go Niners, go Niners. Yeah, I have to go to the Niners. Yes. I was on my way. But there was only one problem. I was leaving too many people behind. When you fight fire with somebody, you put your differences aside, you go in together, and you come out together. I couldn't stomach thousands of people coming out of prison, ready to serve, with no idea how to do it, especially with the growing climate crisis. For a few years, my co-founder Brandon and I had been talking about starting FFRP. We started going back to camp, talking to people about how we made it, telling them that they could do it too, that they could earn about $3,500 every 2 weeks. On the Type 2 crew, obviously. Cal Fire, we making big money. We wanted to create a program that would help give people accurate information about the inside, certifications that they can get when they come home, trying to, we're talking about resume building, we're talking about training workshops, we're talking about application assistance, we're talking about legal and mental support. A program that can help people become better people through the knowledge, skills, and abilities to fight fire. And in 2018, we made it official. We put together a business plan, and Brandon shopped it around. I got $500,000 from the Board of State of Community Corrections, and then Google.org matched it with another $500,000. Yep, you can clap for that. Yeah, you can. I thought FFRP would be a nice thing on the side, because I love Cal Fire. But it became clear that it was a full-time gig, and I had to make one of the hardest decisions of my life. Here I had the dream job with Cal Fire, with all the perks, with a good reputation in the field. I know people can attest to that in here. And now I got to give it all away? Right? And expose my past, because that was on the hush. Captains, chiefs, friends were saying like, bro, you gonna give up your pension and your career? Don't do it. I didn't even know if FFRP would work, but I knew I had the opportunity to change people's lives. The world needed to know that folks like me can go from a public nuisance to a public servant. Boom. Folks like Amity Jaja. We were in camp together. I paroled before him, and I told him that he could be a CAL FIRE engineer one day, that he had what it took. He was apprehensive at first, but I said, trust me, you could do this. And he did that, if you could see right there. Yeah, him. This picture says it all. This is change, and this is growth. And as you can see, he's the only black man in that photo. I'm so proud of this dude. He got twins. He got a house. He got a truck now. His legacy, all of ours, is to put on our uniform, go out into the community, and let the next generation know that they have options. This is me at my son's class on career day, being a dad that I never had. This is what repair and regrowth looked like to me. This is preventative too. When I was that age, I never saw anybody that looked like me on a fire engine. Since 2015, FFRP has trained and placed over 200 people in the fire service and has provided comprehensive wraparound services to over 3,000 currently and formerly incarcerated individuals. And our recidivism rate for our career training program, anybody want to guess? I wish. I wish. 3%. In January 2021, we celebrated our advocacy for and the passing of AB 2147, which allows those who serve in fire camp get their record expunged upon release so they can have more options for employment. This is where it's going to get a little teary-eyed for me, probably. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm just warning you now. And on July 1st, 2022, 12 years to the day after they put shackles on me and took me to Tehachapi State Prison, I was laying in bed in COVID when I got a random call from a 916 number. And usually when a 916 number calls, it's either CAL FIRE or CDCR. So I'm like, I gotta, this might be important, right? So I answer it. Is this Royal Ramey? He said. I said, yes, sir, it is. I'm calling from Governor Gavin Newsom's office to congratulate you on your pardon. I got out of bed real quick and I was like, is this for real? He said, yes, it is. Thinking about the work I put in to become a better person, the struggles, the barriers, becoming a firefighter, becoming a husband, becoming a father, a nonprofit leader, seeing the impact that I have on others, it all hit me in that moment. A pardon doesn't come easy. It was a mark of validation for me. That when you set your mind to helping your community, you can be that phoenix out of the ashes. It's real. And in that moment, I felt like I was being seen for who I truly, am. Oof. So what's next? What's the end I have in mind? I love that we do at FFRP, but 8 weeks are just not enough to train people to meet the demand of the growing climate crisis and transition from a life in prison. When I started with CAL FIRE, I was pretty naive. All I wanted to do was slay the dragon. I wanted to fight fire. Then one day my wife said, "Why are you so focused on putting out fires? Why aren't y'all trying to prevent them? And I realized that almost every firefighter I knew had a limited idea of what fire ecology is. And that's a problem. No offense, I'm saying right now, no offense. You got tree huggers who think all fire is bad fire, even though indigenous people have been using prescribed burning to care for the land, right? To prevent disaster for hundreds of years. And then you got the firefighters who just want to burn without thinking. They don't know about tree identification. They don't know how to identify artifacts. And they don't have no real sense of forest management. At FFRP, we partnered with UC Berkeley, go Cal, to enhance our curriculum to include basic fire ecology. We aren't just focused on fire suppression, but we're trying to preserve the forest we have. But still, I want more. I want 3 12 to 20-month residential training facilities, one in Southern California, one in the Central Valley, and one in the Bay Area. I want to expand our fee-for-service model to deploy hundreds of trainees to cut brush, hand plow, and conduct prescribed burns to prevent what we saw here in the campfire. This is what it takes to really fight fire with fire. Boom. I'm in closing. We got a couple more minutes, I know. Look at the smiles on their faces, the pride that they have in themselves. People are always trying to pigeonhole us as a workforce development organization. But what we're doing is bigger than that. FFRP sits at the intersection of workforce development, criminal justice, and the climate crisis. This is a viable pathway to restore both lives and land, and we simply need to invest in it. Not every single person we train at FFRP is going to become a firefighter for 20 years or have a long career, right? But they will be more prepared to become a productive member of society. They know how they can advocate for themselves, they can get their record expunged, and they have more options for employment. And they can carry that ecological mindset, a community-based mindset and focus that says, not how can I get what I need, but what can I give back? Thank you.
Here, this is just for you. That was just incredible, Royal. And I want you all to know how lucky we all are, because he said that's the first time he's ever shared that story publicly. So I don't know how we're so honored to have that privilege, but thank you, Royal. And thanks to your wife for being here, too. So our next speakers, I'm sure, are just as inspiring and exciting and youthful and energizing. I'm so excited to bring Kyle Trefny and Ryan Reed up from the FireGeneration Collaborative to talk about their work. Yeah, I'll just hand it over to you all and round out this plenary.
Testing.
All right. Ayuki, Nanatwam, Ryan Reed, Asapukuf, Tikaramkuf. Hello, everyone. I'm Ryan Reed. I'm Cody Cooper on UROC from Northern California, Master's in Forestry, UC Berkeley, wildland firefighter for the U.S. Forest Service, FACA committee for the Northwest Forest Plan, but more importantly and more pridefully, I'm a Kariuk medicine person. I'm excited to be here amongst great company, great knowledge, and great inspiration. And before I start to tackle it, I'll pass it over to my friend and colleague, Kyle Trefny.
Hey everybody, my name is Kyle Trefny, he, him pronouns. I'm a wildland firefighter, a student at the University of Oregon. Actually had the pleasure of working with Royal on a fire this past summer in the same division right next to each other among over 70 fires, big fires across the country at the time. And so it just kind of shows a bit of that fire family and the connection that we bring together here and we reignite. I'm also a co-founder of FireGeneration Collaborative with Ryan Reed, and I'm so excited to be here.
As Kyle mentioned, co-founder of FireGeneration Collaborative, that's one of the main reasons why we're here today. But first and foremost, I'm a Kariuk, Indigenous, Hoopa, Yurok, and medicine person, right? So to kick it off, I just want to say thanks to the folks whose land we're on here today, the Esalen tribe of Monterey Bay. Shout out to the elders, shout out to the people who have welcomed us here with open arms and great knowledge and knowledge carriers. To ground everything I've said, all the speeches I've done, I've always talked about where I'm from. It's one of the few things that I've been given, right? And unlike Royal, he said it later on, I'm gonna say right now, there's gonna be tears, right? There's gonna be tears. I'm from, as I mentioned, I'm from Northern California, and so right here in the top left bubble, you'll be able to see the exact location where I'm from. So I grew up in that area. I grew up on the river. I grew up, to give you a little insight, with no cell service. So that means I grew up on the river, learning from the land, learning from the elders as much as possible, as much as they can give me. And so when it comes to the importance of taking care of the landscape, it's directly connected to my experiences, directly connected to my lineage, it's directly connected to the work that we all are here, gathered here for. And so I'll let Kyle also give a little representation of where he's from and the land that he is on and as a guest on.
Yeah, so I grew up in that middle bubble there. That's Ramey land called Yelamu. And it was a long time. I'm a settler, a white settler with ancestry from Europe and Eastern Europe Jewish communities. And you know, it was a long time in my admittedly brief life so far for me to understand what being a settler on this land meant for me in terms of responsibility and a reckoning, and even knowing the name of the land I'm on, whose land it's on, and what that carries, and a responsibility really to indigenous sovereignty, to native ecocultural revitalization, and more broadly than that, like a lifelong commitment. And so I think that that's an ongoing process, you know? It's not something you understand immediately, but it's something that every non-native person here has to take on. And I think that I'm excited to be slowly learning that process and in great company. And I think all of us should be. And again, thanks to the Salinan, Ohlone, Rumsen, Esalen tribes who we're here on. Thank you.
Before we kick off today, I really want everybody to not only step in the room physically, but what you bring into this room. I think a lot of speakers in this time and place, as we just seen from Royal, there's a sense of vulnerability that we need to have, right? I often hear times fire ecologists in my universities that I went to are so prideful of being objective with their science. Objective, what we need to do, what we need to show in the means of Western science, right, with the fist. There's no choice for us indigenous people, us BIPOC folks who have been impacted by settler colonialism. And so when people are so prideful to be objectives, that's a privilege. There is no stake for you. If a wildfire burns through a landscape that you put 10 years into, you get to go to the next one and take care of it. You try to do it again. If it's fire suppression, you'll probably fail. And so there's a personal stake for me. I learned that directly through my life. Whether it's traditionally dip netting at the Ishipishu Falls, the center of our world at Kadamine, or going to the ceremonies and trying, and I put a huge emphasis on trying to go through our trail systems, trying to connect to the elders, though they're so fragmented, they're so broken from the boarding schools, so broken from the things that they're unable to do or share with me, whether it's because they don't know or because they can't, because of the means of survival. They were taught not to talk about their language. They were taught not to teach the next generations of what they need to do, because if they were caught doing it, lighting a fire, talking their language, that's it, right? And so when it comes to bringing something into you, what do you bring into this room, and what are you going to leave with, right? Is it one of the indigenous speakers like myself? Is it one of the BIPOC folks who's speaking about it? Shoot, you can even bring something that you've learned from a white ecologist. But more importantly, what are you going to change in the systems and the structure that you currently live in right now? That's a responsibility everyone has to do right now. And so what this represents is where I come from, a land-based religion. Our effort as indigenous people in the area I come from, our world are new people. So I grew up with that first cup of coffee in the morning, my dad sitting there as I have my eye boogies, waking up and talking about these different terminologies, right? How do you speak the language of these Westerners? How do you speak the language of settlers? And that's the different terminology as I was taught in the living room. Forest, whether it's that cup of coffee veining through to energize him, or it's that pain, that suffering that he has to endure, that's been passed down from generation, for better or for worse. And so a couple of things that we're going to talk about here is also leaked in with the rest of the things that we're talking about here today. Place-based religion, Pikiawish, to fix the world. Pikiawish, our ceremonies, is to fix the world. And as you see systematically, we're not allowed to do those things anymore. And so what I talk about, it's about identity. It's about the things in which we are here to do and put on earth to do today. And so it comes down to this. What is our human responsibility? Oftentimes, we are told that humans should not be involved within the ecosystems, whether that's through ecologists, whether that's through social means, whatever it might be. And so I think a good representation to Kirsten Vignetta's diagram here is that human is an integral, important part of that system. And we lose sight of it. And so we have a role within these ecosystems to take care of them. I have an inherent responsibility to take care of the landscape in which I'm from because it takes care of me. There's nothing else. That's period, right? I don't need research to be told that. I don't need a white person to come into my homeland and tell me that I'm right. I don't. But all these different qualities of things that I've been taught, I grew up understanding why we have these amazing understanding of what needs to happen, putting fire in the landscape, taking care of our communities, but why isn't it done? Why do I not know how to do cultural fire? How come I don't speak my language? These anger that just is inside you for no reason. Why do you wake up mad? You just woke up, right? You just woke up. It's that erasure, as we've said yesterday morning, right? Our women, our two-spirit people. Every time I see someone bouncing back, stepping up into the things that they're really prideful, as we've seen demonstrated throughout this whole week, that's resilience, right? That's what I look up to. That bounce back, that sense of strength that is needed within our communities, that's why we sustained ourselves over geological time. For you folks that are very science-driven, right? What does geological time mean? A millennium, long-term, trial and error. The use of fire was integral. It was the center of everything that we needed. I've been taught that the place we come from is wealth. And I'm not talking about having the house. I'm not talking about the money in your bank account, but it's your ability to take care of your family, to feed the right diet, to be able to have that connection with the landscape as well as your family's on an intimate level. That's what wealth is. That's what I've been taught. Maybe it's because we're broke, but most importantly, it's about who we are, That's the definition of identity. And so when we're talking about violence, when we're talking about why things the way that they are, that's why I went to college, is because I was forced to talk about these things, and now I'm forced to step into the classrooms where white fire ecologists are telling me that that's not really relevant for this subject matter. And so I'm isolated, I'm driven, I'm sick. And every time I step into a classroom at University of Oregon or in the classroom of UC Berkeley, I'm told or not told the things that I've been told my whole life isn't true or is true. And so when it comes to me of why people are like, can you speak so well? How can you be so strong? How can you say these very direct and sometimes hurtful things? Is because that's where I come from. That pain, there is no other choice. Like I said, if a landscape burns and those large tan oak trees or the different cultural resources that are fire dependent get raised to the ground, we can't leave. We're in that pan. We're in that sizzling pan. There is no practicing our religion anywhere else in the world. We don't have the privilege to pick up and leave and build a church and have that mutually respected by the system. No, we don't get that. And it's stuff like this. Hopefully y'all had a chance to read it. These are the policies in which have been inputted in order to demonize fire, to demonize indigenous people for setting them, right? That we're just missionless savages, as you probably have seen in Declaration of Independence. That's all we're seen for. And so we're sitting here, I grew up wondering why? This is why. Smokey Bear, made for us to be ashamed for putting fire in the landscape during the early 1900s, but now who are we asking about putting fire now? Who needs to be in those leadership roles? Who needs to do this? But years ago, we were ashamed out of it. And now, again, we're shamed again for not knowing it. What's that look like? Technical difficulties. And so if you look at the top image here, this is the image and painting of Manifest Destiny. Look real closely to that. On the left side of it, it's the dark Indians running away from the brighter white saviors of this world. And how does this all relate to wildfires? When I see a wildfire and the smoke that it happens, the things that people have a tie to and a reason why they don't like fire, that's colonial smoke. But when you see indigenous people putting fire in the landscape, reactivating that land, reconnecting to that land, putting smoke into the tan oak trees in order to keep the bugs out, as I recently heard from Ron Good the other day, there's a difference between tribal trust smoke and colonial smoke. And so these exponential climate change effects are settler colonialism. And we talk about climate change, we talk about the statistics, we talk about the data, but no one else wants to talk about settler colonialism. No one wants to sit and take a step aside of their positions, their livelihoods, in order to do the things that are necessary, and that means reintroducing indigenous. Not only knowledge and systems, but the people themselves in the position that are needed. No one wants to do it. And so when we're talking about climate change, in my head, it's always, how come we don't catch the salmon like we used to? How come the acorns don't drop from the trees like they used to? And why our generations have to endure the things that are repercussions of that, and my elders are also unhealthy, sad, lost, because they don't know how to pass down that knowledge that they're meant to do. And so it's all connected. There is no separation with it. And so when I'm asked to do a science project on climate change and not the inability to talk about how my people have had to endure it, or the people that are the things in which we have to endure, whether it's not enough salmon and not enough basketry materials, not enough medicines to take care of ourselves. That's what that means to me. And so I'll pass it over to Kyle to talk more about the climate change, because he's been in it for a long time himself. And I think this is where we get into what unity means, what the next generation can do. And it's unite folks who have never ever been united together.
So as we all know, we're in a climate crisis, and it doesn't fall evenly across people. It's disproportionately felt by communities of color, by low-income communities, and by my generation, Ryan and my generation, our generation, and the future generations, right? And so, the scientists, even the best scientists in the world, are saying we're entering a mass extinction. What does this mean for this time in human history? And what does it mean for reckoning? We can see the effects of settler colonialism all around us in fires, in floods, in hurricanes. What does this mean for reckoning when these disasters strip away everything, like Christine was saying, and we're left with our humanity, What does it mean for reckoning? Reckoning. And so, I'm just going to share a couple quotes. What we are experiencing today will be dwarfed by wildfires anticipated within the next 1 or 2 generations. This is the landmark report released earlier this year. You know what it feels like to see this as a young person in the fire world and look at the rest of your life? That quote? How wildly underprepared our generations are for this. I'll share a couple more. We are in the fight of our lives and we are losing. Greenhouse gas emissions keep growing. Our planet is fast approaching tipping points that will make climate chaos irreversible. That's the Secretary General of the UN. And then how about this particular moment in human history? There's a rapidly closing window of opportunity to secure a livable and sustainable future for all. The choices and actions implemented in this decade will have impact now and for thousands of years. That was the 6th assessment report released earlier this year in 2023. What are we doing in this decade, in this moment, to reckon with settler colonialism, with the climate crisis, with fossil fuels that I haven't heard mentioned in terms of the climate crisis for most of this conference? Over 70% of climate change is driven by fossil fuels. And while some people have the privilege to not face that, our young generations, we don't have that choice. And so I want to go back a second because we're on a golf course right now. And we got to do some reckoning, And so our young generations, we've been, in this since freshman year of high school, walking out of school. You've all heard it. This is one from my hometown. I'm actually in the lower right corner there with the big forehead. And the thing is that, young people have been stepping up, mobilizing by the millions all around the world, led by indigenous young people, led by women of color, led by frontline communities. Where do we channel this energy? Where do we bring these voices to? All these young people all over the world, how do we take this, And so what us young people know is that this moment in time is not only scary and devastating, requires a lot of transformative change, it's an opportunity. And I want to pass it back to Ryan to talk a little bit more about that.
As you can see, this picture right here has been passed around for quite some time. It's actually my little cousin there, as well as his mom, a very close friend of mine. And I think that alone goes to show the importance of what fire is and the relationship to it. How does that look like for the next generation? And I've always been taught, what are you going to do for the next generation? Maybe it's more of a question, but really it situates yourself of what are you going to leave? What kind of legacy are you going to be able to not only leave, but what are you going to be able to teach the next generation? I'm 23 years old. I'm already thinking that. Because that's a characteristic of what indigenous intergenerational transfer of knowledge really is. What are you going to be able to pass down and what are you going to leave? And I think, frankly, a lot of what white settler colonialism has only left is more in issues. And so when it comes to what do we do next, we went to Washington, D.C., trying to get opportunities, trying to get a little bit of answers, but really what the question posed on to us is, I don't know, what should we do? What do you think we should do? Oh, I can tell you a million things, but not only are you not going to listen to me, but also this isn't a system for me to understand. I'm 23 years old. What do you have for me? What avenues are you going to be able to do? Are you going to recruit me to get into fire and degrade my body for 15 and 20 years and maybe get a little retirement, right? It's these different unsustainable things in which people are copping out with, using it as an excuse in order to keep their privilege alive. And so this is where FireGeneration Collaborative comes into play. Making this sprint, making this hustling moves to get to the place in which you need to do, that's what we did. Just a little bit over a year ago, this is what we're able to do. And over the course of time, we were able to do a lot. Maybe we didn't get as many answers, maybe we didn't get as much opportunity, but we also understood the importance of younger generations, the importance of empowering younger folks with the mindsets of incorporating indigenous leadership within these different systems.
So you saw that picture. We started out with a GoFundMe a year ago. Now we are a nonprofit, fiscally sponsored organization. We have a much cooler logo, got a much bigger team. And the last year, shout out to Hot and Drake, by the way, for that logo. The last year has been really rich with a lot of opportunities. Ryan mentioned the DC trip. Before the DC trip, we connected with young people in fire and forestry all around the country, and we had a letter representing over thousands of young people and experts calling for young generations to have a formal, established seat in the federal decision-making processes that impact us and our marginalized communities the most. And so we started that with conversations with the leadership of the Forest Service, the Department of Interior, Wildland Fire, and various Congress members. And then in the past year, we've been able to establish some of the first decision-making involvement for young people in processes. So we had a youth panel with the Wildland Fire Mitigation Management Commission, and that led to multiple policies being accepted into the report that many of you have probably read. Ryan is one of the youngest federal advisors in U.S. history on the Northwest Forest Plan. We've launched projects in education and research. We've brought art and community together. And we're just beginning. A lot of this why are we doing this? Like, why am I here during finals week? It's finals week at UO. I'm skipping all of it. And like, why are we working like 30 hours a week on top of being full-time students and these different choices? It's because we don't really have this choice. It's not actually a choice. It isn't a choice. And so that's sort of where we've begun, and I'll allow Ryan to talk a little bit more about how we envision this growing into something larger.
As I've mentioned, the various things in my personal background, the things I've been taught through my ancestry, through my culture and ceremonies, that's a large part of the direction and the foundations and efforts in which FireGen has been able to be a part of. And so as the program director, it's essential to not only ground and empower younger generations together, but also making a change that isn't reproducing settler colonialism, isn't reproducing and further marginalization of communities on the front lines. Next one. And so it comes to the point of what do we do, right? What's our options? What can we make out of this? Why are we here up on this stage? And it's to ask y'all to do something. We're not asking for specifically money. We're not asking specifically to come up here and shake our hand and tell us how great we are. You all can do that, though. That's fine. We're here as FireGen trying to establish and reimagine ourselves with fire, whether it's through art, whether it's through community engagement, whether it's through policy. We all see an important understanding of all these different disciplines, if you will. It's about bringing everyone together. It's about creating a movement. And so when we gather, when we talk, we're not necessarily talking about to amplify FireGen. We're not talking about amplifying us as individuals. We're talking about amplifying the next generation. We're talking about what we can do when you all leave. Have you done good things in the past? Great. Have you done bad things in the past? That's fine too. But what are you going to do in the next steps forward? Because if you don't know what your next step is and you don't take that step, that's also an issue. That's just as bad. And so, again, I want to further emphasize our importance. The reasons why we're here today is to create a movement. And that means cross-pollination. That means meeting with folks and deliberately letting them have space, letting them dream a little bit, and see where that formulates into tangible items. How does that focus and get us connected to where we need to go? And so this is what we're asking of the broader fire world. Educate yourself. I think there's time and time again within this conference alone that a lot of people will talk about the work that they're doing, but then they're also not including Indigenous people within that process at this very conference. That's not an excuse. After all these great elders, all these great speakers come up here and speak about what they have done, laying themselves out there, being vulnerable, but you have the audacity to come in and not do anything when you go back home, that's a responsibility that's being left out. And so that is the importance of educating yourself, of moving forward in that front.
Elevate and support Indigenous-led efforts in your own and other spaces. What are you taking forward? You've come across here probably many Indigenous-led efforts, and maybe you've thought and drawn inspiration from the ways that non-Indigenous-led efforts are amplifying and elevating and investing in Indigenous-led efforts. What does that mean for you personally?
Challenge the dominant wildfire ecology norms. And I think our speakers yesterday morning did a good job and also kind of tried a good job, which I'm really going to call out all of us to get that moment in time to really see that video that we missed out on.
Yeah, we're going to watch it right after this.
Great.
I will hurry up then, Kyle. We gotta go.
All right. Ryan's talked about this, but the system as it stands restricts, and I'll let Ryan can add more to this, but it restricts family and community land stewardship. You know, NWCG, you're not going to have a 6-year-old taking that pack test, but they got to be on the fire. Yeah, they got to be seeing growing up with fire on the land, you know? Imagine what it's like to be a young person that grows up in ecocultural revitalization, a native young person. That's transformative to be, where that's your reality, right? How do we get there?
I think explicitly addressing the patriarchy, the discrimination against the LGBTQ plus communities is essential to progressing. As we've perfectly heard earlier this morning, is throughout the world, all these different efforts to bring equity within these different spaces is essential to including a large percentage when it comes to workforce issues, a large percentage when it means to get this work done.
Yeah. And as a queer wildland firefighter, you know, me and many of other LGBTQ people in this community have faced sexual harassment directly for our identities in this type of work. Already, I've been in this 3 years, you know? How do we reckon with that? There's no reckoning with the interpersonal harms. You hear everything about how to stay safe with fire behavior and NWCG training. Where's the reckoning with the interpersonal harm in this space?
Be worker-centered. Help incarcerated, migrant, and other marginalized folks to be in those spaces and develop a life for themselves that they ultimately deserve. When are you going to be able to have to stop swimming upstream and actually get a break in your profession and work forward?
And these ones kind of come together is really empowering and reckoning with this moment, this decade, this moment for yourself, mentoring, supporting, investing in, empowering the next generation, and centering most impacted young communities in the decisions you make. And I'm actually I'll start this. Equitable fossil fuel phase-out commitments. You know, I'm going to make that for my personal life. I'm working on bringing it to FireGen. And how can each of us step up into this moment and be explicit about the challenges that we face? But there's a broader thing that carries all of this, you know?
Yeah, and as I know we're over time and I'm still going to take up space, and to finish up this thought is, what is that personal responsibility that I've reiterated time and time again? And I'll leave at this, is that you can't say that I never said or told you this.
Great. And so for some final thoughts here, and we thank everybody for your patience and everything we're drawing from these morning talks, is that, you know, I'll share a very brief statement here, is that in the Yiddish communities where I have some of my roots, there's this folk tale of the spiritual leader who, during the holiest time of the year, he's revered by the community, but they can't find him. What is he doing? And the story goes that he's out building fires for other people because it's a cold time. He's building fires, and I think about all the people, so many in this room too, who have helped build our fire here at FireGen, who have helped build the fires of other people. How are you going to step up to be that type of person? And I think that that's something that we're all collectively doing here, is building fires. And so I want to appreciate everyone who's taking that up and encourage everyone to step into this moment in history.
As the last points I want to make is, I want to give a yotwa for the generations who've walked before me. My ancestors, the Ron Reeds of the room, the Frank Lakes of the room, the Ron Goods, all those types of people, and so on and so forth, of what you've had to endure, whether it's entering academia, being the only indigenous person in the room, having to cite white fire ecologists in order to kind of bring in your own perspectives and your narratives to push through those different spaces, the actual getting arrested, putting for fire on the landscapes, all those different people, though it's not paved, it's that trail, that's a little bit of that direction that we're able to grab and run with. And so the last thing I'll say here is that we all have a responsibility. And I can't help but think that the younger generation is grabbing that responsibility, acknowledging the issues that their ancestors or our ancestors have either endured or have that been placed on it and damaged us. And so I'm hopeful, I'm optimistic when it comes to all these different issues that we learn about and kind of get depressed and and don't know what to do. Let's look to each other. It doesn't have to be at a conference. It doesn't have to be in projects. It's all about the relationship. It's about gathering around that fire. So now, what are you going to do with it? Yotwa.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that was the single best morning I've ever experienced at a conference. So just one more round of applause for our 3 sets of speakers. We specifically chose those speakers for the final day because we wanted to leave with some hope and some vision of what the future of this field looks like. It looks like that, and I think it's really exciting, and it's new, and it's old, too. So thank you all. That was really, really beautiful. We are going to watch the video that was corrupted yesterday, so we've made time for that, and we have another couple short videos, too. So let's just jump right into that, because time's a little tight, and let's pull that video up.
In this AFEx talk, myself and two other Indigenous colleagues are going to share short personal stories on our experiences with Indigenous erasure in fire ecology. We are part of a larger team looking to create respectful narratives on research and publishing in this field. We presented the larger project in a special session yesterday, and you'll see our collective work being published in the next few months. My name is Amy Christianson. I also use my Cookum's name, Cardinal. My family is Métis. I'm from a long line of trappers and medicine women in the boreal forest and buffalo hunters on the plains. It is very strange to be an Indigenous person from a nation and territory that is extensively researched like the boreal, and also trying to be a researcher myself. Oftentimes, I'm just going through the motions of my day job, and I'll suddenly come across a statement or article that stops me cold and makes it hard to focus or work for days. I often wonder if the authors realize the huge impact their writings can have on Indigenous peoples. We don't only have to defend our science, but also ourselves as people and our knowledge systems and our way of life. I'm always jealous of researchers who just get to do science. Fire ecology is an especially hard field of study. Decades of research have completely excluded Indigenous peoples. There's been two articles that were especially hurtful during my career. One was by Ellis et al. In 2021, which referred to my family's territory as wild woodlands, which, based on their definition, is the complete absence of human populations and intensive land use. After raising this concern with the authors, it seems they just meant there was a lack of data, which led to this classification. But an oversight like this can be harmful in labeling. The other was by Bell, which was reprinted in the Journal of Fire Ecology in 2012. The reprint contained numerous statements that I personally consider racist and do not add any contributions to his discoveries on fire ecologies. I put discoveries in quotation marks because our nations have stories of educating Western science with our knowledge, who then steal that knowledge for their own career advancement. We can also say this is the language of time, but we don't need to reprint it. For example, one thing he says is that Indigenous peoples don't do anything except by necessity. For myself, I don't really see the contribution to fire ecology in that statement. We have responsibility as the current and future generation of scientists. We need to call out racist ideologies and correct it in both our work and others. Another point to mention is how much additional labor this calling out can create for Indigenous peoples. Every time we raise a concern or point out something that is wrong, we are asked to contribute to educating or fixing it. This then takes away from our own time to pursue things that matter to us and our nations. The threat of AI also looms over us as Indigenous peoples, where our relationships with our human and non-human relatives will be further diminished as we turn to technology for answers it can't give us.
I'm Pit River and Mountain Maidu, enrolled with the Hat Creek Band of the Pit River Tribe. I'm here today because my ancestors are survivors of attempted genocide and removal of tribal people from the landscape. Indigenous erasure affects all of Indigenous people's lives, including mine and my children's. So it's really hard to know where to start with the story. In the field of fire ecology, my story started with a family of firefighters, but also with a family of basket weavers. It led me to be really interested in cultural plants and using fire to benefit all the different ways my family, practices our culture on the landscape. When I started working for a non-tribal agency, I felt like I was constantly trying to speak up and educate different people about where the other part of the story wasn't being told about cultural burning and human fire on the landscape. So for me, Indigenous erasure, it's in all aspects of fire ecology, from the maps we use, where it has racist terms or non-Indigenous names for different ancestral homelands of the tribes. That stuff just, is right in our faces, being tribal fire practitioners that interact every day with fire agencies that don't understand our cultures and our histories. Indigenous erasure is also within the universities where I studied. When I was studying fire ecology, a lot of students used past tense when they would talk about different tribes. And a lot of times I heard a lot of people that went on to work in natural resources speak as if cultural burning was a past practice that was not applicable to today. When non-tribal scientists and managers speak on behalf of tribes without asking them to speak for themselves or to participate in those types of papers or presentations, that is Indigenous erasure. Indigenous erasure includes citing papers that were written by anthropologists during a time when they had no understanding and didn't actually communicate with the tribes themselves. They were outsiders looking in, trying to describe what they thought was a dying race. The reality was that they had no real perspective of the actual culture from an outside looking in perspective. And so a lot of those papers are flawed and use racist terms and demeaning terms about our tribes.
Hi, my name is Frank Kanawha Lake. I'm of mixed Indigenous, North American Indigenous, and European descent, but I affiliate and identify more with Northwest California tribes, particularly being a Karuk descendant and having half-siblings and family that are Yurok. As a tribal person from this area, I want to talk about some of the ways that Indigenous erasure happens in relation to fire ecology. One of the main important things for me that I want to emphasize is looking historically at what are the factors of fire suppression, and particularly the way that fire ecology has been framed. In many of our areas, men were traditionally trained, and still are, on mountain peaks. Many of these high mountain peaks are called medicine or fireplaces, and those were places that men were taught by elder men about how to make medicine in relation to lightning storms and weather, as well as to make medicine for world renewal and other practices. These areas were often some of the first places that fire lookouts were put on, and these fire lookouts were then there to suppress both lightning and indigenous ignitions across the landscape. That denied access to these sacred places, but also was a form of erasure by often removing the very rocks and artifacts that are there as part of those fire altars in the foundation of those fire lookouts. So as those lookouts are taken down and we look and move toward more remote sensing capacity, we should have a reconciliation about what was the happening of those places, at those medicine places or sacred places in regards to tribal fire knowledge in relation with lightning and fire medicine. Also to look at the ways that we can restore and repatriate those sacred medicine places in relation to tribal fire knowledge and those medicine places and sacred sites. Another aspect that I want to talk about and address has to do with the notion of natural fire regimes. Many places across this landscape are considered lightning influenced, and they are, but also there's a significant important part of the indigenous contribution to these fire regimes, both looking at increased frequency and the seasonality. Many of the fire scar samples that we have and we get talk about and document that cultural fire history, and those are important legacies of understanding indigenous ecologies of that. As fire lines are constructed, both through dozers and other processes, hazard trees are felled, stumps are burned out, and things like that, all these fire suppression and contingency line things through dozer and burnouts lead to eventual and other forms of erasure, removing that history of indigenous fire use on that landscape. When we lose those from high severity fires through dozer line construction and other processes during fire suppression activities, we lose the ability to teach our next generation. We have to be able to consult our tribal colleagues and elders and practitioners, how we use fire historically as cultural communities, and how we begin to use that in partnership to move forward. Many of these places are in the legacy of the vegetation, and the trees, the composition, whether it's the shrubs, the artifacts, are all legacies of indigenous stewardship that we can learn to live with fire to recognize and prevent the erasure of indigenous ecologies as part of fire ecology and teachings. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sticking around and watching that, and sorry it was corrupted last time. We have one more video. Is Carla here? Carla? Oh, great. Do you want to come up and introduce it? Wonderful. Great, I wasn't sure.
Yeah, thank you. Mishistu, Gain Karat Carla Marie Munoz, Gaha Kostanon Rumsen Carmel Tribe, Gaha Rumsen speaking Aloni. So good morning, everyone. Welcome. We're so excited to be here. My name is Carla Marie Munoz, and I'm a tribal councilwoman and youth facilitator of the Kostanon Rumsen Carmel Tribe.
Hello everyone, Mrs. Shadowy, Kainkarak Desiree Munoz, Kaha Masisa Mane, Kaha Kostanoan Rumsen Carmel Tribe, Kaha Rumsen speaking Aloni. So good morning everyone, my name is Desiree Munoz. I'm part of the Kostanoan Rumsen Carmel Tribe. I'm Rumsen speaking Aloni. So Inkate, welcome to our territory. Are we gonna go into the video?
Let me say the video first. Okay, so this video is super important to our people because when we decided that we wanted to bring ceremony back to this place, when we wanted to work with an entity called the Big Sur Land Trust, they allowed us to use their landscape, and I say their landscape because they own it, and what happened was they didn't want us to have the fire, and we needed that fire to have our connection to that spirit world, but we also needed that fire to be burning for 4 days because the medicine that we were bringing is actually our bear ceremony, and that's the most sacred ceremony of our people. So it was during COVID times, and my grandfather was like, hey, that's not right. We need to have our fire. If they're asking us to go and pray for the land and pray for the healing, then we need that connection to the spirit world. So what he decided to do, since he couldn't be here in person, we wanted to subject our elders to this new disease that was spreading all across the globe. We had him video record this message, and so we want to share that with you all. Yeah, it's time. Hey. So he recorded this video, but this was right after his stroke. You all heard from him in the beginning that he had a stroke that affected his memory and a lot of the knowledge that he carried for so many years, 45 years of being the chief of our tribe. So this was really fresh after that. So please enjoy this video on the sacredness of fire.
Mrs. Dukes, good day.
My name is Tony Serta. I'm chairman of the Kostanoan Rumsen Carmel Tribe. And I'm sitting here right now thinking about what it is that we need. It's important to have a good relationship with the people that own the land so that we can do our ceremonies here and visit the land whenever we want to, because that should be our birthright as people from this land, to be able to come to this land without getting permission from nobody and doing what we have to do to take care of the land, because it's so important that we're able to come and pray and do what we have to do, because this is the land that we are from. We originated from this land, and there's always somebody trying to keep us out, and that shouldn't be done. We should be able to come to this land, because our people never owned the land. We just used it. We've done a lot of ceremonies here because we care for the land and we take care of it, and we're very careful in how we use it, because the land is not only our land, the land is part of us. It's part of our ancestors for thousands of years of being buried on this land and becoming part of the dirt and part of the rocks and part of the trees and everything else here. So we feel related to everything. And that's a feeling that we get from inside, that we know that we belong here and it belongs to us. Now, it's very important that we have a fire when we have our our ceremonies. Because we always, for thousands of years, have always worked with fire. We've had ceremonies in the mountains, we've had ceremonies in the woods, we have ceremonies all over, and we know how to deal with ceremony. There has never been a forest fire started by our ceremonies. Now, there's people that have been trying to do our ceremonies and doing things that haven't done things that they shouldn't have. But our people, for thousands of years, did this ceremony using fire, which is very important. It's one of the most important things to us, fire, because without fire, you wouldn't even be able to eat the food that you eat, because that fire cooks your food, warms your house, keeps you warm, does everything that you need is done by fire. So that's why we have to protect the fire, and that's why we have our ceremonies to pray for that fire, so the fire can keep helping us and taking care of us, which is one of the most important things that we have in our life. A lot of people don't realize how important fire is to our life. Just think about it. Just think about how important fire is for you being here. Sometimes people don't even think about it because they take so many things for granted. Us as Native Americans, we don't take that for granted. We know what fire has done for us all through the years. And because our people have always had fire and we've never had to have permits. The permits have, we've asked for permits, but we have, our permit is from the Creator. We don't have to ask for permits because those are ceremonies, and you could look into our history and see how many atrocities or fires that were caused by our ceremonial fires. You will never find any. That's been our number one priority, is to take care of the fire, because the fire has always taken care of us. Because it's very important that you get the understanding of what this land means to us and what has always meant to our people for all these thousands of years that they've been from here, not as ownership, but as caretakers of this land. We're very thankful to you for reaching out to us so that we can have a good, meaningful relationship that helps us bring all the people to know about this land and to learn to take care of it. But with you involved in helping us do it, it's so important that our kids are able to do this and our descendants are able to do this. We want our tribal members to have that working relationship with that land as other people have been provided to do this kind of ceremonies and visits and things that they do in our homeland. So our kids should have that same opportunity, because that will help us in our future. I want to thank you all as the chairman of the Coastal Northern Ramsey and Cardinal tribe for this opportunity to be able to express some of our needs of our people. Thank you.
So I just want to say that as Indigenous people that are always around fire and surrounded by that spiritual connection and gateway to the spirit world, as we're in ceremony, we wear a lot of flammable material. And we're very close to that fire because it's also very cold in our territorial areas. And we're never burned. So that's just one thing I wanted to say.
And I hope you all don't mind. I know we were only scheduled again for a short period of time because we had to show that erasure video. But keeping with that theme of erasure, we want to make sure that we don't erase that ceremonial part of this closing. We want to offer a couple of songs for you right now. So if you all don't mind sticking around a couple more minutes to listen, I know I've been promising you all a serenading, and I brought my Ohlone sister here with me today. So we're going to do a good job at doing that for you. So please bear with us. And for you all nons out there that don't know Rumson of this territorial village, that's a gambling song, and that's the gambling that we're taking every day by showing that we're still here and we still exist and we are resisting all that red tape to continue our culture and our ceremony today. So the next song that we're going to sing, and all the songs that we're sharing for you today are all social songs, so feel free to record us, feel free to share us on social media. Just remember to tag us. Which one do you want to sing? Okay. Oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah, hey, oh yeah, yeah, hey, yo. Oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah, hey, oh yeah, yeah, hey, yo. Oh, Niso, oh, Yamane, ah, oh, Niso, oh, Yamane, Niso, oh, Yamane, oh, yeah, hey, oh, yeah, hey, oh, yeah, hey, oh, yeah, oh, yeah, hey, oh, yeah, hey, oh, yeah, oh, yeah, hey, oh, yeah, hey, oh, Niso, oh, Yamane, ah, oh, Niso, oh, Yamane, oh, Niso, oh, Yamane, oh, yeah, hey, oh, yeah, hey, oh, yeah, hey, yo, oh, oh. Thank you. Now I want to try something with all of you out there. You know, all of these songs are all about showing appreciation because in our territory there was abundance of everything here. So the way that we show appreciation is through our songs, and the way that we show gratitude and listening to those songs. So maybe as you heard them, you got a good feeling in your stomach. Maybe it brought a good feeling to your heart. Maybe when you heard it with your ears, it sounded really good, and you want to show that appreciation, like that round of applause that I love so much. But how we do that is we let out a big oh of appreciation. So I want to try that with all of you. I'm going to count to 3 in my language, and I will point so y'all can keep up. And on the count of 3, I want to hear that big O of appreciation. Imala, utis, kapes. You know, that was pretty good. But just, you know, to make sure we shake up all the spirits of the land here, let's try it one more time. Imala, utis, kapes. Beautiful. Okay, we got 2 more for you because we got to do 4 songs. So that last song was a social song, and that one was about dance, and that was all about dancing. I don't know if you felt that when you heard it, but we definitely put a lot of spirit behind that. But of course, this is the Bay. This is a water planet, and I'll let my sister tell you about that.
So less than 0.1% this water is good enough for you to cook with, to clean yourself with. Hopefully y'all used some water today by brushing your teeth when you first got up, drank some water. I mean, y'all are already using water, right? And that's even to cook your food with, right? So think about how important water is. But water is so important because we're not only in charge as Costanoan people in charge of this big, large body of water that surrounds our planet, but we come from the most beautiful place of Ohlone territory. And I don't know if you know the whole span of Ohlone territory, but it spans all the way from San Francisco down to Big Sur throughout the Salinas valleys, and it borders the Coast Miwok, the Bay Miwok, the Yokuts, and Esalen relatives. So it's a big territory. And in our place of where we come from as Rumsen people is what I like to call the most beautiful place here in Monterey down to Carmel area into the valley of Carmel. And that's just me, maybe because I'm Rumsen, but I don't know. But in these Carmel Mountains, there was a 1,200-year-old village where Shania, who was the chief of 25-year-old men and younger, that was a warrior society. And his job was always to make sure that his people were good, and he always raised warriors. And I feel like that he did a good job because it ran all the way till now, because I feel like I can call myself a warrior. But in this place, it's so beautiful because there's something called the Carmel River. And the Carmel River ran through the Carmel Valley, and it actually meets the ocean. And we have a special song that one of our relatives, when a lot of this area was unsafe for us to practice our ceremonies, when we decided to leave back into Southern California, she said, "I'm sorry that I failed you. I'm sorry that our people are no longer going to hear these songs and feel the vibration, because creation feels vibration. And I'm so sorry that we have to leave you, but it's unsafe, and we want to continue our practices. So in that way, we have to leave." So there's a song that starts off in the Carmel Valley, and it starts in the river, and it gets faster and faster as it comes and meets the ocean. And we always come back to the Carmel River, and we let our ancestors know, and we let that relative know we're still here, and we still practice our songs and our dances. So I hope you can hear that in this song as we honor her in this way. Oh. Na tu nan chi tu ta mahaya bu tu tan chi tu moe. Na tu nan chi tu ta mahaya bu tu tan chi tu moe. Ika mahe awaka mahaya ne ya ne. Ika mahe awaka mahaya ne. Ika mahe awaka mahaya ne. Ika mahe awaka mahaya. Ika mahe awaka mahaya ne ya ne. Ika mahe awaka mahaya ne. Ika mahe awaka mahaya ne. Ika mahe awaka mahaya. Ika mahe awaka mahaya ne ya ne. Ika mahe awaka mahaya ne. Ika mahe awaka mahaya ne. Ika mahe awaka mahaya. Oh.
Oh, yeah. We learn fast. That's good. Oh, we like that. All right. So we're in the right space. This last song that we're going to sing to close us out, and you guys can get on with your day, and you ladies as well. Hey, no, I'm just. But this song is for the hummingbird, that hummingbird spirit. It was the hummingbird that was responsible for bringing fire back to our people. And in that sacrifice, her throat was burned, and that's why now she has a ruby red throat. So I know that I was visited by a lot of hummingbirds while I got to sleep here, and I know they probably visit you all too. But remember, those are the spirits of our ancestors coming back to remind us of who we are and where we come from. So this song is for the hummingbird. And when we dance, you've seen us dancing around the fire, you've seen all the feathers. We actually mimic the hummingbird when we dance. So we are actually called the Humaya singers and dancers. And that's because we bring that fire back to the people. So this song is dedicated to that hummingbird. Humaya, Humaya, yo. Humaya, Humaya, yo. Humaya, Humaya, Humaya. Humaya, Humaya, yo. Humaya, Humaya, yo. Humaya,
Thank you all for having us, Shururu. Don't forget CRCT, hashtag Aloni Sisters, tag us. We want to see how we looked on stage. Oh!
All right, thank you for staying late, and have a wonderful rest of the conference, and make sure you're going to come to Santa Fe next November for